welcome back. You're listening to The Human Resource. Now, for those of you who have not been watching the show on a regular basis, let me reintroduce one of my original partners on this particular show, Karl Ulrich.
Thank you, Pandy. It's great to be here.
You had to wait for a different cue?
I did, yeah.
Karl is my longtime mentor and sometimes partner, an attorney with Sebaly Shillito Dyer here in the Southern Ohio market. He is my go-to guy for unions. So if that gives you any kind of a hint of where we're going with this conversation today on the show, you are absolutely right. In fact, I have to say right off the top that, do you realize that we started in 2015?
Yeah. It seems like a long time ago. And it was a long time ago.
Well, and what the audience probably doesn't remember is that we would come in completely cold and not have talked about anything except as we were walking down the hallway. Well, what do you want to talk about on today's show?
That's right. Well, which is a little bit what we did today.
Yeah.
I mean, we had, you sent me an email this morning and you said, here's what we're going to talk about. And then we sort of fleshed it out as we walked through the hallway on the way to the studio. So that's okay. I can handle that.
There's
so
no
can
other
you.
way.
I know you can.
Yeah, there's no other way for the two of us to work
That's
together.
That's right.
Karl has been in this industry for so long that I have learned a great deal about what I don't want to do and what topics I don't enjoy doing. But as you may have gleamed from a show here most recently, I love the topic of the National Labor Relations Act. We talked about Section 7 and why that's important to both non-union as well as union companies. But today I wanted to kind of focus on what is the current state of unions here with this pro-union administration?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I don't remember the exact quote, but I think President Biden came out saying this is going to be the most, or what is the most pro-union administration in either decades or history or something like that. It was a very upfront, open statement on the part of the administration. And the question really is, what have we seen happen over the course of the past 3 years or so? From my perspective, I'm a management labor relations attorney, so I represent management in most, if not all, of the work I do. And much of what I do is in the manufacturing arena, which is a classic union industry. Manufacturing, particularly auto industry stuff, is very heavily unionized, has been historically and traditionally. So I have a perspective on it from that angle. But I would say, we haven't really seen the rush to unionization that I think many pundits, many observers were predicting, at least not yet. I think if you look at the statistics, if you really look at the numbers, you go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, for example, they track the number of unionized workers compared to total workforce, non-union workers, and so on. So they break that down fairly regularly on an annual basis. And if you look at those numbers, what we find is that the actual percentage of union labor as a percentage of the total workforce has really gone down, continues to go down, even in the last 2 years. And that's been a trend really for the last probably 3 or 4 decades. I think since the 80s, we started seeing a decline in union workforce. So interestingly, despite all the headlines, despite all the noise that you hear, you're still not seeing a rush to unionization. You're seeing a lot of union activity at various levels, but it's not reflected in union membership as a percentage of the total workforce.
Now, we're taping this show in December of 2023, so what Karl's referring to is all the activities that we've seen in the auto industry, maybe even a few other entities that or organizations that have already were currently organized, and it was all over the news. Karl, you couldn't get away from it.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we all remember the Amazon unionizing activity. We remember hearing about Starbucks baristas trying to unionize at various locations at in the Starbucks operation. We've heard recently about striking UAW workers with the big three, the major automobile manufacturers. So you're hearing in the headlines a lot of union-driven activity like that. The real question, though, and the real, I think, answer to the question you're asking is, how widespread is that? How reflective is that of the overall economy as a whole? And I think, again, what I would say is the same thing I said before. I don't know that that is reflected across the entire economy. As I say, I work mainly in the manufacturing field with manufacturers, but the numbers I'm referring to are numbers across the entire economy. So again, we're not seeing that result in a sea change or a fundamental shift in union representation as a percentage of total workforce.
So what is that telling us as a population? When it looks like the unions are winning in a number of areas, when we see an administration who says, yes, we think everybody should be unionized, and yet the general population is going, I think I'm okay. Is there truly a sense of satisfaction, or is it just that unions are not well thought of? They're not as perceived to be as effective?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do you think? I mean, I'm just throwing things out there, but what do you think's the real reason we aren't seeing more in this time where it's prime?
I think the trend that we're seeing in gradual weakening of union influence over time is a result of many factors. I think a lot of it has to do with the economy shifting away from those traditional manufacturing type jobs. As manufacturers become more efficient, make more with less labor, do the things that all employers want to do, become more productive with less cost. There are fewer and fewer jobs in those traditionally heavily unionized industries. Those jobs are shifting into other industries. You see a lot of IT, a lot of startup, a lot of other non-union jobs where the union representation is not a traditional or a historical part of the landscape. So that's part of it. I think the other part of it too comes from the way the government over time has worked with employment-related issues. I think you see a lot of employment regulation now independent of the union context. You see a lot of, I always point to the Family and Medical Leave Act back in the early 90s when, we began to see some regulation come out ensuring and preserving certain or providing certain benefits to employees that they didn't have before by law, by statute. That has happened and increased over time. We're seeing more and more of that. And I think as that occurs, that's a lot of what the unions fought for over time, those kinds of things. And when they're provided through other means, people begin to question, well, what are the unions really there for? So that's part of it. I think, and that trend also continues. But I think also the National Labor Relations Act and the Labor Board itself are beginning to talk about regulation and guidance in the non-union context more and more. They're reaching into that non-union world to talk about, for example, the effect of confidentiality provisions, what you can and cannot talk about, what you can and cannot as an employer prevent employees from engaging in. Social media. There are a lot of regulatory initiatives that have come out of the National Labor Relations Board that relate to non-union workforces. And so as we see more of that happening, again, the relevance of unions is I think, becoming less obvious. So,
it's almost a contradiction.
In a way,
I mean, that's a really good point. General Counsel even reached into severance agreements and pulled out what I always called the gag order out of severance agreements, allowing people to discuss certain aspects of a severance agreement, which we never would have allowed even 5 years ago. And the whole non-competes, non-solicitations, they're coming in. So a group that wants everyone to unionize is now coming in and saying, well, maybe we can. And state laws, look at all the different state laws that are adding paid time leaves and family leaves and restricting non-competes.
The other thing we should mention, too, another major factor, which I neglected to talk about a moment ago, is the right to work laws. The states have, a lot of states, I think 27 now in the union, have passed right to work laws. And the idea behind a right to work law is to make it illegal for unionized labor to create a contract which freezes out or prevents non-union workers from working at that location. In other words, a lot of times you'd have a contract that says union or no, you're either a member of the union or you don't work here. Those right to work laws make that illegal, and so what that does is it opens up the workforce to people who don't want to be members of the union, opens up that employment setting to people who don't want to join the union. So as that makes inroads into the exclusivity of union membership, it weakens the unions. And so that has, in many of these states, has really undermined the power of union organizing.
Well, and do they still have to pay union dues even though they're not in the union?
In most cases, no. And I think, and they can opt out. They have the right to do that. There are the laws vary from state to state, of course, but the one commonality among those right to work laws is to weaken the power of the union to allow people the choice to be employed without having to be part of the union process.
You made a very interesting comment earlier about the baristas in Starbucks. Talk to us about micro unions and how they've even come up. I mean, we've talked a little bit about this over the years, but this is still a dangerous territory because we're just not prepared for it. We're not looking for this.
Right. Well, the fundamental assumption behind the National Labor Relations Act, which is kind of the starting point for all things union, right? Section 7, among other things, says that you have the right to act in a concerted way regarding the terms and conditions of employment. What that means is you've got two people, and it just has to be two, who get together and say, we want to go to management and negotiate a deal. And anytime more than one person get together to do that, it's a protected activity. And that's a concerted activity protected under the Act that doesn't require a formal union, doesn't require the United Auto Workers or whatever other union you have. It could be anybody acting informally as a group, approaching their workers or approaching their management to negotiate and talk about terms and conditions of employment. And so when you talk about micro unions, you may talk about a group of baristas at a particular location going to their management and saying, we don't think $13 an hour is enough. We want you to pay us all $15 an hour to start and go up from there. Now, that's a protected activity because it's a group of people getting together and interacting on wages and benefits. And that's, and people forget that the National Labor Relations Act encompasses that kind of activity just as much as the formal labor union, big placards, picket lines, big organizational stuff. That's as much a part of the Labor Relations Act as all the other stuff we talked about.
So what's the message to employers at this point? Because that's a perfect segue. That's going on every day.
Right.
And most employers do not recognize it. They're not picking it up. They haven't been trained to hear that. And that's why we're talking about it today. Listeners and viewers, what should we give them as a indicator or as a signal that this is leading down the wrong path?
Well, I think one of the most important takeaways from this discussion is as an employer, when employees come to you and say, we want to talk to you about wages, or when you hear that employees have gotten together to talk about their wages and benefits, the one thing you do not want to do is penalize or punish them for doing that. You're stepping into a legal problem. I think the best if you want to avoid union entanglements, if you want to avoid Section 7 violations, National Labor Relations Act, what you do is you keep the lines of communication open. You don't have to say yes, but you communicate with your workers. And don't forget to sell the good things about your workforce. Don't forget to talk to them about all the good things that are going on. But don't necessarily react negatively when they come to you with questions or concerns. It's important to keep those lines of communication open and to honor them.
And ladies and gentlemen, if your conversations aren't working as you had hoped, you call somebody like Karl, because he's the one to call to for this kind of topic on unions. Guys, I hope you really enjoyed the show. My name is Pandy. And remember, we're here for you. So let us know what you want to hear about. Thanks for watching.